My name is Gina Walsh, and I was 28 years old on the Christmas morning when everything in my life quietly changed. That morning, I handed my parents a small wrapped box. It wasn't big or fancy, just a simple little package with plain paper and tape. Mom laughed the moment she saw it. "Let me guess," she said with a little smile that didn't feel kind. "Another dollar store candle from the family disappointment." Dad didn't even lift his head from his phone. My sister spoke from across the room before I could answer. "Just open mine instead," she said lightly. "It's actually worth something." I stood there for a second. Then I slowly pulled my box back toward me. I opened it myself right there in front of everyone and lifted the thing inside. My mother began crying almost immediately. My father finally raised his head and stared. What they saw inside that small box changed everything in the room. Before I tell you what was inside that box, take a moment to like and subscribe if you truly enjoy stories like this, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what your local time is. I always like seeing where people are listening from. Now, let me take you back to where this story really began. Growing up in our home outside Syracuse, New York, there were basically two different kinds of daughters. There was Belle, and then there was me. My father, Tom Walsh, worked as a plumber. He had strong hands and quiet pride, the kind of man who judged his success by whether the bills were paid and the roof stayed over our heads. My mother, Diane, worked the front desk at a dental office. She liked things neat and organized. She liked things she could point to proudly and say, "See, we did okay." Belle was the thing she pointed to most often. My sister was 4 years older than me. She graduated from Boston University and married a corporate lawyer named Derek Kessler. They lived in a clean, beautiful suburb outside Boston with tidy streets and houses that all looked perfect in photos. Belle had the degree, the wedding ring, the career title, and the holiday pictures that looked like they came straight out of a magazine. She was exactly what my parents imagined when they thought about success. And me, I went to community college. I taught myself data analytics by taking online courses and reading books from the public library. When I was 22, I moved to Albany with a second-hand laptop in a tiny studio apartment about the size of a parking space. Every time I came home for holidays, my mother would introduce Belle first to every visiting aunt or cousin. Then she would gesture toward me like an afterthought. "And this is Gina," she would say. "She's still figuring things out." I was always figuring things out. Never finished, never complete, never arrived. One small thing has stayed in my memory more than most people would expect. On the wall in my parents' living room, there were 11 framed photographs. I counted them one Thanksgiving the year before everything changed. I'm not even sure why I counted them. Maybe I was bored while everyone talked about Belle's. New hair highlights, 9 of the 11 photos were of her. Her graduation, her wedding day, her vacation in Santorini. The other 2 pictures were family group photos. Not a single picture on that wall was just me. I stopped counting after that day, the Christmas before everything changed. My mother gave Belle a silver pendant necklace with her initials carefully engraved on it. The chain was thin and delicate, and the necklace came in a velvet box. Belle held it up toward the light and admired it while my mother smiled proudly like she'd given away something deeply meaningful. Then she turned to me and pushed a flat gift bag across the table. Inside was a sweater, purple dot. I don't wear purple. I've never worn purple. My favorite color is navy blue. I've told her that more times than I can even remember. Birthday lists, back to school shopping. The time she asked what color to paint the guest room. Navy blue, every single time. "Mom," I said quietly, trying to stay calm. "You know I don't wear purple." She waved her hand like it didn't matter. Oh, I must have been thinking about someone else. Belle laughed from the couch. Maybe she was thinking of someone who actually tells people what they want. I didn't argue. I simply pulled the sweater over my head and wore it the rest of the evening. Nobody noticed. Nobody said it looked good. Nobody said anything at all. But later that night, after the dishes were done and everyone had gone to bed, Something kept turning over and over in my mind. My mother knew Belle's exact necklace size. She had measured her neck to get the chain length perfect. She knew the clasp Belle preferred. She knew which font Belle liked for the engraving. She even knew the jewelry store's return policy, but she didn't know my favorite color. That night, I drove back home through cold, freezing rain on Interstate 90. I gripped the steering wheel tightly and finished a thought I had never allowed myself to finish before. One day I will stop pretending this doesn't hurt, but the purple sweater wasn't the worst thing my mother ever gave me. The worst thing came the next year, and it wasn't even a gift. It was just a single word dot the following April. I drove home one Saturday to help my mother clean out the garage. She mentioned it casually during a phone call earlier that week. She didn't ask for help directly. She just mentioned it. But I showed up anyway, because that's what I always did. Show up. Don't expect thanks. Don't expect recognition. When I arrived, she asked me to grab the mail from the box on my way inside. Most of it was junk mail. Grocery flyers, coupons, a Bed Bath & Beyond catalog. That honestly should have stopped arriving years earlier, but at the bottom of the stack, there was a thick envelope from First Heritage Federal Credit Union, across. The top was a red stamp that said Final Notice. I didn't open it. It wasn't addressed to me, but I saw enough. That night I lay awake in my old bedroom. The radiator made the same squeaky sounds it always had. The stain on the ceiling still looked like the shape of Florida. Through the thin wall I could hear my parents talking in low, tense voices. My mother spoke first. "We can't keep hiding this, Tom," my father replied quietly. "We'll figure something out." Then he added something that stuck with me. "Don't you dare tell the girls." The next morning I said nothing. I smiled. I helped move boxes in the garage. I ate the chicken salad my mother made without asking whether I even liked chicken. Salad dot, then I drove back to Albany. But I didn't go straight home. Instead, I stopped at a small coffee shop, sat in a quiet corner booth, and opened my laptop dot. It took me 3 days to uncover the full picture. County property records, mortgage, documents, payment history. The house had been bought in 2005. It had been refinanced twice. The last mortgage payment had been made 37 months ago. The remaining balance was $87,412. My parents were about to lose their house. I stood in my apartment kitchen later that week, holding the final notice letter in my hands. A question kept repeating in my mind. If I told Belle, would she help? I called her on a Tuesday evening dot. I spoke carefully, like someone handling fragile glass that might already be cracked. "Hey, Belle, have you talked to Mom and Dad about the house lately?" There was a pause. Just a second or two. But it was the kind of silence that answers the question before the person speaks. What about the house? She asked dot she already knew. I could hear it in the way her breathing shifted slightly. Her voice tightened a little. "Belle," I said. Slowly, "I saw some letters from the bank," she sighed. Not the sigh of someone hearing bad news for the first time. It was the sigh of someone tired of carrying a secret. "Yeah," she admitted. "It would leave me with almost nothing. Years of discipline and careful choices would drop down to a number barely above 0. I stared at the spreadsheet on my screen for a very long time. The numbers were clear. The decision was simple, but the weight of it sat heavily in my chest. Finally, I picked up my phone and called the bank. I explained that I wanted to make payments on my parents' mortgage account as a third party. The representative sounded confused. At first, she placed me on hold. Then another person came on the line. Then I was transferred again. It took nearly 20 minutes before someone finally confirmed that yes, they would accept the payments. But there was one condition dot. The full balance had to be settled before the foreclosure process officially moved forward. I started sending money the following week. Every month, steady payments, never missing a date. Never late. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not Belle, not my friends. I didn't post about it online. I didn't mention it casually in conversation. I didn't even hint at it dot. I simply did it. The only person who knew was my boss, Margaret Calloway. I had to explain why. I was requesting my annual bonus to be released early. She read through my request slowly. Then she looked up at me over the top of her glasses. Gina, she said quietly, the fact that you're doing this says everything about who you are. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small. Margaret approved the advance that very afternoon. For the next 6 months, I lived like I was 22 again. No extra spending, no small treats, no dinners out, no unnecessary purchases. Every dollar had a destination, but this time there was a difference. When I was 22, I was just trying to survive. Now I knew exactly what I was building toward. Then Christmas. Morning arrived. Light snow drifted gently over the highway as I drove home. It was the kind of snow that doesn't stick, but makes everything look softer and quieter than it really is. The small box sat on the passenger seat beside me, buckled in like another person. It was wrapped in silver paper with a red ribbon tied around it. Small enough to hold in one hand, when I pulled into the driveway, the house was already full. Aunt Ruth's Subaru was parked along the curb. Uncle Mike's old truck sat crooked near the mailbox. Kevin's sedan with the Penn State bumper sticker was squeezed along the side. And Belle's sleek black Audi was parked closest to the front door like it always was. Grabbed the box and walked up the steps. I knocked once, then let myself in. The living room hit me like a wave of sound and smell. Cinnamon candles burned. On the side table, something was frying in the kitchen. Bing Crosby's voice played from the old Bluetooth speaker my father refused to replace. Coats were piled over the banister. Shoes crowded the floor near the door. Belle sat on the sofa with her legs tucked under her, telling a long story about a ski trip in Vermont. Derek stood near the fireplace holding a glass of red wine and slowly swirling it around like he was posing for a magazine photo. Kevin and Stacy sat cross-legged on the floor near the Christmas tree, scrolling through their phones. Uncle Mike was half asleep in the armchair by the window. My mother came around the corner from the kitchen wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Oh, you made it," she said casually. "I was starting to think you forgot about us." "Merry Christmas, Mom." Her eyes moved briefly to the small box in my hand. Then she glanced at the tree. "You can put that under the tree. We'll open presents after brunch." Nobody asked how my drive was. Nobody asked how work was going. Nobody asked about my life at all. Conversations simply continued around me like water flowing around a rock. Aunt Ruth noticed me standing there. She caught my eye from the dining room doorway and smiled warmly. "Gina, sweetheart, come sit next to me. How's the city treating you?" I sat down beside her and waited. Brunch was always my mother's big moment of the day. It wasn't just a meal, it was a performance. There was glazed ham, scalloped potatoes, fruit salad with those tiny marshmallows. She had been adding to the recipe since 1998. We squeezed around the table, elbows touching, passing dishes back and forth. Halfway through the meal, my mother suddenly stood up. She tapped her fork gently against her juice glass to get everyone's attention. "I just want to say a few words," she said with a wide smile. Everyone looked up. "I want to make a toast to Belle and Derek." This year, Belle was promoted too. Senior vice president at her firm, and Derek made partner at his practice. We are so proud of them. Applause filled the room. Uncle Mike clapped loudly. Stacy lifted her glass. Derek gave a modest little nod like he was trying to look humble. Kevin turned toward me. "What about you, Gina? Anything new?" I opened my mouth to answer, but my mother spoke first. "Oh, Gina is still at that little computer job," she said cheerfully, like she was explaining something harmless. "You know, Gina, she's always been a late bloomer." Belle tilted her head slightly. "Mom, be nice," she said with a playful smile. "Not everyone reaches their peak at the same time." For a brief moment, I felt 12 pairs of eyes slide over me the way people glance at a small stain on the carpet before looking away again. "I'm doing fine." "Kevin," I said calmly. "Thanks for asking." Under the table, Aunt Ruth reached over and gently placed her hand on my knee. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to dot at the head of the table. My father sat silently, looking down at his phone. His thumb moved slowly across the screen. He hadn't spoken a single word since we sat down. I chewed my food. I swallowed. I smiled. But here's what none of them knew. Belle's firm wasn't some giant company. It was Derek's small boutique. Practice with 12 employees, including the receptionist, and my little computer job had just helped close a data contract worth $4.2 million. I didn't correct anyone. Not yet. After brunch, I stepped into the kitchen to get a glass of water. The faucet still dripped slowly. The same drip it had made for 3 years. The one my father kept promising he would fix someday. I filled a glass and stood there for a moment. Looking out the window at the backyard, dusted with snow. Belle appeared in the doorway behind me. She leaned against the frame with her arms crossed. "Can I give you some advice?" she asked. I turned slightly. "About what? What? Hi." With her arms crossed. "Can I give you some advice?" she asked. I turned slightly. "About what? Do you even begin?" "About your gift." She lowered her voice like she was doing me a favor. "Whatever it is, just don't make it awkward, okay? Last year was that homemade coupon thing. Mom didn't even open it." "It wasn't a coupon book," I said quietly. "It was a travel itinerary. I planned a whole weekend trip for them." She waved her hand dismissively. "Same difference. Just keep expectations low, for your own sake." I took a slow sip of water. "What did you get them?" I asked. Belle smiled confidently. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they already know they've won. A weekend at the Adirondack Spa, already booked. "Derek and I are covering the entire thing." I nodded. I didn't mention that Derek's firm had just gone through its weakest billing quarter in years. Didn't mention that the spa weekend cost less than a single mortgage payment I had been secretly sending for months. I just nodded. Double quotes. "Thanks for the advice, Belle." I rinsed my glass in the sink and set it carefully on the drying rack. She lingered in the doorway for a moment. "I'm just looking out for you, Gina," she said. "Looking out for me. The same person who had known our parents were drowning in debt and hadn't even thrown them a rope." I dried my hands on the dish towel and walked back to the living room. The box still sat under the tree, where I had left it. Small, silver, quietly waiting. The room had that warm, staged holiday glow. The Christmas lights twinkled gently. Wrapping paper colors matched perfectly, because my mother had carefully planned the aesthetic. Belle's gift sat proudly in the center under the tree. A large gold box with a bright red bow, placed exactly where everyone would see it first. The cousins had brought wine baskets and scented candles. Aunt Ruth had a small gift bag with tissue paper sticking out of the top. Uncle Mike brought a tin of his homemade fudge like he did every year. And then there was mine, a tiny silver box about the size of my palm, pushed slightly into the corner near the tree skirt, almost hidden unless someone was looking closely. Derek noticed. At first, he picked it up and turned it over in his hands. "What's this?" he said jokingly. "A ring box?" He laughed. Stacy leaned forward to look. "Maybe Gina finally has a boyfriend," she teased. "It's for Mom and Dad," I said calmly. My mother glanced at the small box. Her lips curved into something between a smile and a smirk. "How sweet," she said. Belle clapped her hands excitedly. "Okay, I'll go first," she announced. "I want to see Mom's reaction." She handed the large gold box to our mother. My mother carefully peeled back the wrapping paper. She always liked to take her time opening gifts. Inside was a framed photo of Belle and Derek wearing matching cable knit sweaters. Next to it was an envelope containing the spa voucher. "Oh, this is beautiful," my mother said happily, pressing the frame against her chest. "Tom, look at this." My father glanced up from his phone for a moment. He smiled briefly and then looked back down again. Everyone clapped politely. Belle glowed with pride. The room Slowly grew quiet. My mother's eyes moved toward the small silver box sitting on the coffee table where I had placed it. She reached out and picked it up. And in that exact moment, everything I had carried silently for 28 years finally rose to the surface. Asterisk. Now, before I tell you what my mother said next, I want to ask you something. Imagine you were in my place. Imagine you had just spent every dollar you had to save your parents' house, and nobody in that room knew. Would you still hand them the gift? Or would you quietly take it back and walk away? If you were watching this moment happen in real life, what would you do? Would you still give the gift because it's the right thing to do? Or would you keep it and leave because you're tired of being treated like you don't matter? Think about that for a second. Now let me tell you exactly what happened. But first, I need to go back just a little. Because before my mother picked up that box, something else happened. Something small. Something no one else in that room noticed, except me. Between the brunch toast and the gift exchange, while Belle was telling everyone another long story about her ski trip, and Derek was walking around refilling wine glasses, my phone buzzed in my back pocket. I stepped quietly into the hallway near the coat closet and answered. Hello? Gina, Merry Christmas. It was Margaret Calloway, my boss. I could hear voices and laughter in the background from her kitchen in Saratoga Springs. Merry Christmas. Margaret, I said. I just wanted to let you know, she continued gently. The bank confirmed everything this morning. The final payment cleared on December 19th. The deed transfer paperwork will be filed January 2nd. You did it, Gina. I closed my eyes and leaned against the wall. For a moment, I didn't say anything. I just breathed. Thank you, Margaret, I finally said quietly, for everything. You okay? She asked after a moment. You sound a little tense. I'm with my family, I replied. There was a short pause on the line. Then she spoke again, softer this time. Well, remember something, Gina. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your kindness, but you also don't owe anyone your silence. I let her words sit in my mind for a moment. Then I thanked her again, wished her a happy holiday, and ended the call. When I walked back into the living room, Belle looked up from the sofa. Who was that? She asked. We're calling on Christmas? Just my boss, I answered. Belle shook her head with that familiar expression of polite pity. See, that's the problem with your situation, she said. When your job calls you on Christmas, that's not a career. That's just a chore. I didn't respond. I sat down again next to Aunt Ruth. She reached over and squeezed my arm once, gently. Without saying a word. In my pocket, my phone still showed the call log. 3 minutes and 14 seconds. The most important phone call anyone in that room would ever hear about, but not yet. While the cousins were arguing about football and Belle was helping my mother arrange dessert plates, I quietly slipped upstairs. My father's study sat at the end of the hallway. It was a small room with wood-paneled walls, a metal desk, and a filing cabinet that probably hadn't been organized since the Clinton administration. The room smelled like old newspapers and peppermint candies from the jar my father always kept. By the lamp, I knew that room well. 8 months earlier, I had stood in the same place, my hands shaking while I read through 3 years of overdue mortgage statements in the pale gray light of a winter morning. Walked over to the filing cabinet. Second drawer from the top on the left side. I opened it. The old letters were still there, stuffed together without any order. Envelopes creased and folded and reopened too many times, but sitting on top of the stack was a new envelope. White, clean, unopened. It was from First Heritage Federal Credit Union. Across the front, printed in clear black ink, were 4 simple words: paid in full mortgage account closed. My father hadn't opened it. I picked up the envelope and turned it slowly in my hands. The postmark said it had arrived. 5 days earlier, he must have carried it inside with the rest of the mail and dropped it into the drawer without reading it. Maybe he was too afraid. Maybe he thought it was just another warning letter, another notice from a bank demanding money he didn't have. Except he didn't owe them anything anymore. Not anymore. I placed the envelope back exactly where I had found it. Then I closed the drawer. For a moment, I stood alone in that quiet room and allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I had done. Then I went downstairs again. My small silver box was still sitting on the table where I had left it. My father sat only 6 feet away in the living room, scrolling on his phone, completely unaware that the best news he had received in years was sitting in that drawer upstairs. And the matching copy of that letter was inside my gift box. Few minutes later, Aunt Ruth found me outside on the front porch. I hadn't planned to go outside. I just needed air. The cold kind that bites your cheeks and clears your head. The snow had stopped and the street was completely quiet. Christmas morning streets always have that strange stillness. No traffic, no lawnmowers, just silence and cold air. Aunt Ruth stepped out behind me and pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. For a moment, she didn't say anything. We just stood there watching our breath turn into small white clouds. How? Are you really? She finally asked. I'm fine, Aunt Ruth. Gina. She said my name the way she always did. Not casually. Not automatically. She said it like she meant it. Aunt Ruth had worked as a nurse for 30 years before retiring. She could see pain the way other people see storm clouds forming. I see how they talk to you, she said quietly. I've seen it for years. And honestly, I'm ashamed I didn't say something sooner. I didn't answer right away. The cold air felt good. Clear and sharp. Whatever is inside that little box, she continued softly. I hope you're giving it for the right reason, not to prove something. Not to earn their love. Just because it's who you are. I looked at her. I said. She pulled me into a hug. It wasn't a tight hug. It was more shoulder than squeeze. Warm, brief, steady. The kind of hug that says things words can't quite explain, no matter what they say when they open. She whispered. Remember something. You already won, sweetheart. We stood there for another minute. Then she patted my arm and went back inside. I followed her. The living room had rearranged itself around the Christmas tree. Everyone was getting comfortable, ready for the gift exchange. My box sat on the coffee table. Small. Silver. Waiting. And so as the gift exchange moved quickly. Kevin opened a new watch. Stacy received a gift card and pretended to be thrilled. Uncle Mike unwrapped a flannel shirt and held it up proudly like he had just won the lottery. Aunt Ruth opened a soft cashmere scarf from my mother and thanked her quietly. One by one, the gifts disappeared from under the tree. Ribbons curled on the carpet. Wrapping paper piled into the recycling bag near the door. And then there was only one gift left. Mine. My mother picked up the small silver box. She held it lightly between 2 fingers, the way someone holds something they don't expect to matter. All right, she said casually. Let's see what Gina brought. Belle didn't even look up from her phone. Just open mine instead, Mom, she said. It's actually worth something. A few people laughed. Short, uncomfortable laughs, the kind people make when they don't know what else to do. My mother shook the box gently. It barely made any sound. Then she said it's light. She smiled, not at me, but at the rest of the room. Let me guess, she said. Another dollar store candle from the family disappointment. The room froze for a moment. Then a few more quiet laughs spread through the group. Derek smirked behind his wine glass. Stacy looked uncomfortable, but stayed silent. Kevin stared down at his shoes. My father sat in his armchair holding his phone, eyes still on the screen. He said nothing. Did nothing. 12 people in that room. Not one of them said, "That's not okay." Not one of them said, "Don't call her that." Aunt Ruth opened her mouth. I saw her chest rise as if she was about to speak, but I was already moving, because in that moment, I realized something very clearly. I was done waiting for someone else to defend me. I stood up from the couch. The room shifted slightly. Not physically, but in that subtle way a room changes when someone stops following the expected script. I was supposed to laugh it off. I was supposed to make a joke about myself. Was supposed to shrug and let the moment pass like I always had. But this time ID in single quotes T. My mother still held the box. She hadn't opened it yet. Now she was looking at me. Her smile slowly fading into confusion. Belle glanced up. "Mom, don't be mean," she said lightly. "I'm sure it's thoughtful in a Gina kind of way." Derek leaned forward. "Is it a gift card?" he asked. "Those are always practical." My father finally spoke. "Just let her give whatever she wants to give," he said quietly. "It's Christmas." But his voice sounded tired. Thin, the voice of a man who had stopped arguing with life. "A long time ago," my mother sighed. "I'm just saying every year it's the same thing. Belle brings something beautiful and Jenna brings." She lifted the box slightly like it was proof of something. "Well," I looked around the room. 12 people. My family. The people who were supposed to know me better than anyone else in the world, but in that moment they felt like strangers sitting in a waiting room. "Aunt." Ruth leaned forward again like she was about to speak, but I was already walking toward my mother. I stopped in front of her and held out my hand. "Give it to me," I said calmly. Her eyebrows lifted. "What?" "The box," I said. "Give it back." "Gina, don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic, Mom." My voice was calm, surprisingly calm. I had expected my hands to shake or my voice to crack, but neither happened. "You just called me the family disappointment in front of everyone I love," I continued. "So no, that gift isn't for someone who says that about her own daughter." I gently took the box out of her hands. The room fell completely silent. I held the small box against my chest for a moment. My hands were steady. "That surprised me more than anything." "This was supposed to be your gift," I said quietly. "But I'm going to open it myself, right here. And then you can decide whether you deserved it." "Gina, stop it," my mother said quickly. Her tone had changed now, less amused, more uneasy. "You're making a scene." "She's always like this," Val muttered softly to Derek. "See? This is exactly what I was talking about." My father slowly set his phone down on the armrest of his chair. For the first time that entire morning, he actually looked at me. Not a quick glance. Not a distracted skim. He gave me his full attention, like a man who suddenly realized something important was happening in the room. I pulled the red ribbon loose. It slid off the box and fell softly to the floor. Then I lifted the lid. Inside the box were 3 things: a single polished brass key, a white envelope. And a folded sheet of paper. I placed the box on the coffee table. Then I picked up the folded paper and opened it slowly. I held it up high enough for everyone in the room to see. Aunt Ruth noticed first. She read the page from across the room. Her hand immediately rose to her mouth. She made a small sound, something between a gasp and a whisper, and covered her lips with her fingers. Kevin leaned forward, squinting. Uncle Mike removed his reading glasses, then quickly put them back on. Stacy lowered her phone. My mother stared at the paper, but hadn't fully read it yet. Her eyes moved slowly across the words, as if she was trying to piece them together. 10 seconds. That's all it took to change 28 years. But those 10 seconds weren't finished yet. The paper was a single page printed on official letterhead. From First Heritage Federal Credit Union. The title at the top read clearly, "Mortgage Satisfaction Letter." Below that were the printed names, Tom Walsh, and under the signature line was a section labeled "Paying Party." The name there read Gina. Walsh. The words near the center of the page were impossible to miss. Mortgage account paid in full. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was heavy. The kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes you suddenly aware of your own heartbeat. Kevin spoke first. "Wait, is that what I think it is?" Stacy slowly set her phone face down on her lap. She had started recording earlier as a joke and had forgotten to stop. Derek straightened in his chair. His jaw tightened. He looked at Belle, then back at the paper, then back at Belle again. Belle didn't move. She sat completely still, her lips slightly open, staring at the page in my hand like it was written in a language she had never seen. Before Dot, my mother's expression slowly collapsed. First, the smirk faded. Then the composure Dot, then the confidence Dot, and underneath it all, something else appeared. Dot, recognition Dot. She started crying. Not the soft, controlled crying people do in public Dot. This was different. Messy. Loud. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep inside you when something breaks open. Dot, my father slowly stood up. He moved the way people move when they aren't sure their legs will support them. He walked toward me and gently took the paper from my hands. His fingers trembled. This is real, he whispered. Go upstairs, Dad, I said softly. Check the desk drawer in your study. The bank sent you a copy too. You just never opened it. He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Maybe he was Dot, my father. Turned and slowly walked upstairs. Dot, nobody spoke. Dot, we all just stood there listening to his footsteps creak across the old floorboards above us. Dot, then we heard the desk drawer slide open. Moment later, there was the faint sound of an envelope tearing. 2 minutes passed. Maybe less. Dot, it felt much longer. Then my father came back down the stairs. Dot, his face was red and wet with tears. In one hand, he held the opened envelope. In the other, he held the same letter. His reading glasses were pushed up onto his forehead. It's real, he said. Dot, his voice cracked. The mortgage, it's paid off. My mother slowly lifted her head. What? She whispered. How? We owed 87. She stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes found mine. You, she said quietly. You paid it? I picked up the brass key from the box and held it out. This is the new key, I explained. The locks were changed when the title was cleared. The deed will be filed with the county on January 2nd. I looked at both of them. This house is yours now. No debt, no bank. Just yours. All of it? My mother whispered. Every dollar. My mother made a strange sound then. Something raw and broken, like a sentence that never became words. She covered her face with both hands and sobbed at my father slowly sank into the nearest chair, holding the letter against his chest while staring up at the ceiling. Aunt Ruth was crying quietly in her seat with one hand pressed against her heart. Mike wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Kevin leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, shaking his head slowly in disbelief. Nobody clapped. Nobody cheered. Nobody raised a toast. They just sat there, absorbing the weight of something they never expected to see, because they had never been looking. Belle hadn't moved. She was still sitting on the sofa with her hands resting in her lap, perfectly still, like someone waiting for a photograph that was never going to be taken. Kevin finally broke the silence. Wait, he said slowly. Gina paid the entire mortgage by herself? That's what she said, Aunt Ruth answered, firmly from across the room. Belle swallowed. I could see her throat move. I didn't know it was that serious. The sentence dropped into the room, like a glass shattering on the floor. Every head turned, not toward me, toward her. You did know. Belle? I said quietly. My voice stayed calm. Mom told you 6 months ago. My mother's head snapped up. You knew? Belle's calm expression cracked slightly. Mom, you told me not to worry about it. I told you we were struggling, my mother said slowly. Her voice wasn't angry yet. It was something worse. Confused. I asked if you and Derek could help with even one payment. Derek stared down at the floor. His hand had quietly moved away from Belle's. Aunt Ruth leaned forward and spoke clearly, like she used to when giving difficult medical results. $87,000, she said. Your sister paid every single cent, and she never asked for credit. Belle opened her mouth, then closed it again. She looked at me for the first time in my entire life. I watched my sister search for words and find none. The golden child sat, silent, and the invisible daughter stood there holding the key. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I simply stood there and let the truth exist in the room. My father leaned forward in his chair. Gina, he said quietly, How? Your job? I thought you were. You thought I worked a little computer job. I finished gently. He looked down at my mother, wiped her face with the back of her hand, and looked at me again. Then, what do you actually do? She asked softly. I'm a senior data analyst. I said, I work for a property technology company in Albany. I've been there for 6 years. I started as an intern and worked my way up. I paused. This year, I helped close a deal worth $4.2 million. The room was so quiet I could hear the faint buzzing of the Christmas tree lights. My boss, I continued, the one who called earlier today. The one Belle said proves my job is a chore. She's the CEO. She called because she respects me. Belle looked down at her hands. My mother's voice sounded fragile. Why didn't you ever tell us? I let the question sit in the air for a moment. It deserved an honest answer. When exactly should I have said it, Mom? I asked gently. Between the moment you called my job a chore and the moment you called me the family disappointment? She had no reply. I didn't expect one. My voice softened. I didn't do this for recognition, I said quietly. I did. Because this house is where I grew up. I learned to ride a bike in that driveway. I did homework at that kitchen table. I looked around the room, and I didn't want you to lose it. I paused for a moment, but I need you to hear something. The whole room waited. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The room was already listening. I love this family, I said. That's why I did what I did. But something has to change. My mother wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. My father gripped the armrest of his chair. I am not the family disappointment, I continued. I never was. I just wasn't the daughter you wanted to show off, and that's your loss, not my failure. I looked directly at my mother. She flinched slightly, but she didn't look away. From now on, I said calmly, if you want. Me at this table in this house, at these holidays, I need to be here as an equal, not as a joke, not as an afterthought, not as the person whose gift gets laughed at before it's even opened. Stacy had both hands over her mouth. Kevin was nodding slowly, like he was hearing words he had felt for years but never said out loud. I'm not asking you to thank me, I said. I'm asking you to see me. That was all I had. No dramatic speech. No big ending, just the truth standing in the middle of a living room that smelled like cinnamon and regret. My father moved first. He stood up, walked across the room in 3 shaky steps, and wrapped his arms around me. He didn't say anything. He just held on tight. His shoulders trembled. It felt like 28 years of silence were packed into that hug. Aunt Ruth was crying openly now, pressing a napkin to her face. Uncle Mike stood beside her with a hand on her back. Kevin cleared his throat, blinking quickly as he looked away. Stacy slipped her phone all the way into her pocket, screen down, like she was putting something important away, and Belle stood near the doorway with her arms wrapped around herself. Her eyes were red and shiny as she watched the room slowly rearrange itself around the daughter she had never taken seriously. She didn't move, she didn't speak. For the first time in her life, Belle Walsh Kessler was not the center of the room. My father eventually sat down beside me on the couch. The room had grown quieter. Kevin and Stacy had drifted into the kitchen, giving space without anyone asking. Uncle Mike stood by the window with his arms folded, staring outside. Aunt Ruth stayed in her chair but said nothing. She'd already said everything that needed. Saying. My father kept smoothing the bank letter with his thumb. I need to tell you something. Gina, he said quietly. Okay. I knew about the mortgage before your mom did, he admitted. I was the one who fell behind. He paused and swallowed. I lost half my work hours about 3 years ago. Business slowed down. Younger plumbers came in charging less. And my body, he rubbed his knee gently. My knees aren't what they used to be. I couldn't keep up. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. I was too ashamed to tell anyone, he continued. Not your mother. Not Ruth. Nobody. I thought I could fix it myself. dig out of the hole alone. He shook his head. I couldn't. He turned toward me, his eyes wet. When I looked at you, he said slowly, working hard, living on your own, never complaining. I should have been proud, but instead I felt ashamed because my 28-year-old daughter was handling life better than I was. His voice broke, so I looked away. I stared at my phone because it was easier than looking at you and seeing everything I thought I'd failed at. I reached over and took his hand. It was rough and calloused. The hand of a man who had spent his whole life fixing things and building things. I'm sorry, Gina, he whispered. I'm so sorry. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was real, and real was enough to begin. My mother approached slowly, like someone walking towards something fragile she'd already broken. She sat on the edge of the coffee table across from me. Her face was red and blotchy, mascara faintly smudged. For the first time I could remember, she didn't seem to care how she looked. Gina, she started. She pressed her lips together. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything right now, I replied. But I do, she insisted softly. I called you that word in front of everyone. I said terrible things. Yes, I said gently. You did. You didn't mean it, Mom. My tone stayed calm but firm. Maybe you didn't mean to be cruel, but you meant every comparison. Every time you introduced Belle first and me second. Every time you remembered her necklace size, but forgot my favorite color. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I could see the realization forming slowly on her face. I don't even know why I did that, she whispered. Because it was easier to be proud of Belle, I said quietly. She gave you things you could show people, a degree from a good school, a big wedding, a son-in-law with a fancy title. I paused. I gave you things you had to feel, and you chose the things you could frame on a wall. My mother covered her mouth as tears slipped through her fingers. I reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. I love you, Mom. I love you, Mom, said softly. But love isn't enough if it only goes one way. She looked at me without the usual armor she wore around people. I want to fix this, she whispered. Then fix it, I replied. Not with words. With how you treat me from now on. The afternoon slowly settled into the quiet rhythm that Christmas afternoons usually have. Dishes clattered in the sink. Leftovers were packed into containers. Coats were taken from the banister. People said goodbye in softer voices than usual, like the house itself was still thinking about everything that had happened. Belle was standing by the front door when I stepped onto the porch. She had her coat on and her scarf half-tied. Her car keys rested in her hand. Derek was already sitting in the Audi with the engine running, white vapor drifting from the exhaust. Belle, she turned toward me. Her eyes were red, but her posture stayed stiff. I don't need a lecture, Gina, she said quickly. I'm not here to lecture you. I stepped closer. The porch light cast long shadows between us. I just want you to know something, I said. I don't resent you. She blinked in surprise. You probably should. Maybe, I said, but I don't. She glanced past me through the living room window where the Christmas lights were still glowing. I knew about the house, she admitted quietly, and I didn't help. I know. Why didn't you say that inside? She asked. Why didn't you throw it in my face? Because that's not who I am. I paused before adding the next words. But the fact that you expected me to says something about who you've become. She inhaled sharply. We stood there for a moment in the cold air while Derek's engine hummed quietly in the driveway. We can still be sisters, I said finally. But it starts with you seeing me as your equal, not your supporting character. She nodded once, tight and small. Then she turned, walked down the steps, and got into the car. The Audi drove away slowly. The red taillights disappeared into the gray winter street. I went back inside. The house felt warm, quiet. The Christmas tree lights still flickered softly. and the walls held the echoes of everything that had finally been said. January 2nd arrived quietly. I was sitting at my desk in Albany when the email came. It was a confirmation from the county clerk's office. The deed had officially been recorded. Tom Walsh and Diane Walsh, sole owners. No liens, no debts, filed and stamped. I forwarded the email to my parents. My father replied within the hour, just 2 words. Thank you. My mother replied about an hour later with a longer message filled with spelling mistakes, too many. Exclamation marks and the kind of honest emotion that comes from someone still learning how to say what they feel. I printed the confirmation and placed it in a folder. Then I opened my banking app. Balance? $2,340. I stared at the number for a long time. 6 years of discipline. 6 years of packed lunches, old cars, skipped vacations, and careful decisions. Reduced to a number that wouldn't even cover 2 months of rent. My phone buzzed. A message from Margaret. Proud of you. Now take care of yourself. I smiled. Then I set the phone down and looked around my small apartment. Quiet, simple, mine. $2,340 in the bank, but a conscience that felt completely clear. I didn't feel rich. I didn't feel heroic. I felt light. The kind of lightness that doesn't come from having more money. It comes from no longer carrying something heavy that was never meant to be. A secret. I would rebuild. I knew I could. I had done it before with less. The difference this time was that I wasn't building something to prove myself. I was building from something I had chosen. My savings account said $2,340. My self-respect said something very different. 2 weeks later, I drove home again, not for a holiday. Not because anyone asked me to come. Just because it was Saturday and I wanted to see my parents. That alone felt new. My mother opened the door before I even knocked. She must have been watching from the window. She hugged me in the doorway longer than she usually did and said softly, "Come in, it's freezing." The house smelled like fresh coffee and something baking in the oven. I hung my coat on a hook beside the door. There was a hook now that hadn't been there before. It was placed at my height, right where someone my size would naturally reach. A small detail, but I noticed. I walked into the living room and stopped. There were 12 picture frames on the wall. No. 13. The new one hung between the Thanksgiving group photo and Belle's wedding portrait. It was a picture of me standing in front of my office building, wearing a navy blazer and smiling in that slightly awkward way. I always do when a camera catches me off guard. It was my professional headshot from LinkedIn. My mother had found it, printed it, framed it, and hung it on the wall. I stared at it. Longer than I meant to. I put it up last week, my mother said quietly from behind me. I hope that's okay. I turned around. It's okay, Mom. She shifted the dish towel in her hands nervously. I also ordered new placemats for the table, she added. Navy blue. I remembered. I looked at her. She looked uncertain, like a student turning in homework she wasn't sure would pass. But she had tried, and that mattered. Thank you. I said, and I truly meant it. My father walked in from the back hallway. His sleeves were rolled up, and there was sawdust on his boots. For once, he didn't have his phone in his hand. Hey, kiddo, he said with a small smile. He nodded toward the backyard. Want to help me fix the porch railing? It's been leaning since October. Sure, Dad. Small things, quiet things, but exactly the right direction. 3 weeks after Christmas. My phone buzzed on my nightstand at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. It was Belle. For a second, I almost didn't open it. Not because I was angry, but because of habit. Belle's messages usually came with a purpose that helped Belle. An opinion she wanted confirmed. A photo she wanted praised. A problem she wanted someone else to carry. But something made me swipe. The notification. Her message read, "Hey, I've been thinking about what you said on the porch. About being equals. I don't think I've treated you that way. Not for a long time. Maybe not ever. And I'm sorry." I read it once. Then again. Then a third time. There was no follow-up sentence. No excuse. No, but you also. Just the words. Sitting there plainly on the screen, I set the phone down, walked to the kitchen, made a cup of tea, drank half of it, then came back. An hour later, I replied, "Thank you." That means something. 3 dots appeared on the screen. They disappeared, then appeared again. "Can we get coffee sometime?" She wrote, "Just us. No mom. No Derek. Just us." I leaned back and looked at the ceiling. I thought about 28 years of purple sweaters, interrupted sentences, and always being introduced second. I thought about her knowing our parents were struggling and choosing not to help. And I thought about the word equals and what it might actually look like between two people who had never practiced it before. "I'd like that." I replied, "No exclamation point, no emoji." Just a simple answer. Because I had learned something important. Forgiveness isn't a single moment, it's a direction. You don't suddenly arrive there. You move toward it slowly, one small choice at a time. Some days you step forward. Some days you step back. And that's okay. Bell. And I would eventually have that coffee. Would it fix everything? I didn't know, but the door was open. And neither of us had closed it. People hear a story like mine and often say, "You're so strong." And I appreciate that, but I want to be honest about what strength really looked like for me, because it wasn't what most people imagine. Strength wasn't standing in that living room holding up that piece of paper. That was the easy part. By then, the hard work had already happened. 6 months of payments, 6 years of saving. Lifetime of learning how to value myself even when the people closest to me didn't. Real strength looked different. Strength was the Tuesday night in September when I sat at my kitchen table staring at a bank transfer for $4,000. My finger hovered over the button, and I asked myself one simple question. Am I doing this to be loved, or because it's the right thing to do? If the answer had been to be loved, I would have stopped, because that kind of debt can never truly be repaid. But the answer was simpler. It was right. And I had the ability to do it, so I did. Strength wasn't winning the room that Christmas morning. Strength was knowing I would have been okay if I had walked out of it. I didn't stay because I needed them. I stayed because, for the first time, they showed me something different. Clumsy, imperfect, awkward, but real. They were trying. If they hadn't been, I was prepared to leave. I had already made peace with that. And that more than the house, more than the key, more than the letter, was the real gift I gave myself. You don't need your family's permission to know your worth. You don't need their applause to build a meaningful life. And you don't need their apology to set boundaries. But if they offer one, a real one, it's okay to stay and see what grows next. The following December, I drove home again. Same highway. Same winter snow. Same 2.5 hours on the road. But when I walked through the door, something felt different. And it wasn't the house. My mother met me in the hallway. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," she said. "I made your favorite mushroom risotto," she remembered. In the living room, the wall still held 13 frames. But now there was a 14th. It was smaller, sitting beside the lamp on the side table. I almost missed it. It was a photo of Belle and me sitting together in a coffee shop in downtown Albany, both laughing about something I can't even remember now. Apparently, Belle had sent it to Mom without telling me. My father stood up when I entered. His phone sat face down on the end table. He crossed the room and hugged me. "How was the drive, kiddo?" Belle arrived about an hour later. She knocked. She used to just walk in. When I opened the door, she looked at me and smiled slightly. "Hey, sis." No performance. No comparison. Just the word. Derek stepped in behind her and nodded. "Good to see you, Gina." And this time I believed. He meant it. Aunt Ruth sat in her usual chair, watching everything quietly with a warm smile and a cup of coffee balanced on her knee. When we started opening gifts, my mother reached for mine first. She unwrapped the paper carefully. Inside was a leather-bound journal with gold lettering on the front. Walsh Family Recipes. I had spent 3 months collecting every recipe our grandmother had ever made. I gathered them from old church cookbooks, handwritten notes, and Aunt Ruth's memory. My mother held the book to her chest and closed her eyes. "This," she said softly, "is the best gift I've ever received." Nobody laughed, nobody compared gifts, nobody made jokes. It was just a family, imperfect, a little scarred. Still learning. Sitting together in a house that still belonged to them because someone loved them enough to make sure it did. It wasn't perfect, but for the first time, it felt real. If you're listening to this story and you recognize yourself somewhere in it, if you're the one your family overlooks, the one whose gifts get laughed at before they're opened, the one who gives and rarely hears a simple thank you, I want you to remember something. You are not the family disappointment. You might actually be the quiet backbone they haven't learned to appreciate yet. The one who shows up. The one who remembers. The one who sits at midnight, doing the math and figuring out how to make things work. One day they might see it. They might stand in a room with tears in their eyes, wondering how they missed it for so long. But even if they don't, even if they never open the envelope, even if they never count the frames on the wall, even if they never remember your favorite color, you will still know. And that is enough. Don't wait for someone else's. Permission to value yourself. Don't wait for their apology before setting boundaries. You can love people deeply and still refuse to be their punchline. My name is Gina Walsh. I was 28 years old the Christmas morning. My mother called me the family disappointment in front of 12 relatives. I'm 30 now. I'm telling you this story from the living room of my own apartment. The $2,300 I had left eventually turned into a fresh start. And the family I grew up with is still learning, still stumbling sometimes, but finally walking in the right direction. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying until the end. Now I have one final question for you. If you had been holding that small silver box, knowing everything it had cost you and hearing the things they said, would you still have given it? Or would you have taken it back and walked away? Tell me your answer. And if this story made you feel something real, consider subscribing. I share stories like this every week. There's another story waiting for you as well. I'll see you there.